This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, the voice of Respectonomics, joins you this morning with our co-host, Sarah Benton, and to the world at large, wherever you may be, whatever time you may be, we say good morning.
Good morning, Jeremy. Good
Good
morning,
morning.
everyone.
Good morning, Sarah. Today, our Compass Point series is talking about a subject that has become almost a lightning rod, and we're talking about the toxic work environment. And Sarah, I know that you have a significant, what I call HR background, and I want to be very clear what part of this toxic work environment we're talking about.
Okay.
The reason is because as I've talked it around, it's become a touch point catch-all expression that when you say to somebody the toxic work environment, their eyes light up practically. There's a sort of visceral response, bodily response. And what you realize when you're discussing that everybody's got their own instinct, their own idea of what a toxic work environment looks like and what it
Mhm.
means. However, what I think is very compelling and needs to be addressed is the issue that everybody feels that they're in a toxic work environment.
I was
I
going to
haven't
say
heard
probably
anybody.
because everybody's experienced it at some point in time, if not currently, right?
I think there's the experience, which is that history book. And then on top of that, there's the current situation where people are looking at volatile conditions, whether they're economic, political, relationship, whatever they are. There is, excuse me, excuse me, there is an issue with people feeling that they're being undervalued and disrespected. And it's actually to be, when we get onto the subject specifically, it's also worth going back to the issue of respectonomics itself, whose proposal is to restore the dignity of the human being. Once that dignity is, shall we say, hijacked or minimized, diluted, it creates a whole slew of unhappiness and great problems.
Mm.
So, to the working environment and the toxicity thereof. And what I want to start with, and this sounds terribly negative. Well, I suppose we're talking about a negative subject, so I'm okay. But what I want to talk about is something here, and that is there are two strands of the toxic environment that we're not going to be talking about. The
Okay.
first one is probably your camp, where you deal with conflicts of interest, or where you talk about where you need conflict resolution. And
Mm.
the example I give on that is you've got 10 people in the room, but there's only 9 parking spots. And that creates a level of tension, a level of reorganization and arrangement, and so on. I'm not talking about that kind of conflict.
Okay.
Secondly, and this one really surprised me, I mentioned to a, excuse me, a very successful businessman, and I said to him that I was working on this toxic work environment, and he actually, I'm going to say he almost lit into me because what he wanted to talk about was the politicization of the saying the right thing to the right people. That when
Mhm.
people feel you haven't said the right thing to me, I am mortally offended, and we get into all kinds of
So a respect in the
altercations.
workplace issue.
Yes. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
not really talking about, yeah, the respect in the workplace I think is an absolute. I don't think that's indivisible. The divisibility I'm referring to here really is where you have this almost a cultural change going on, where the semantics are changing. I mean,
Mhm.
my classic example more recently was when a very good friend of mine and I said something to her about, I think I said, you're a very fine lady. And she
Mm.
took offense because lady was considered or has been considered to be a sort of colonial throwback to the concept of ownership. And as you know, I have 2 daughters. Nothing would be further from the truth. But what was
Right.
important was that is how she received the comment.
Correct.
And therein lies a truth that needs to be massaged and talked about. No, Sarah, what I'd like to share with us this morning, with our audience and with you and with our friends, is this whole business of the toxic work environment. And you mentioned a moment ago about the experience of it, where somebody or some people are actually working behind your back, where there's an issue of deception, an issue of manipulation, there's gaslighting, there's all of these really nasty things. And to make the nasty nastier, the nasty isn't on the surface. The nasty is tucked away so you can't see it,
Mhm.
and yet it's there. So we're going to be talking about that kind of toxin. And before I go any further, I better say, are you comfortable with this approach?
Of course.
Well, you can always say, of course not.
Well, it's the topic that you'd like to discuss and in the parameters in
Yeah.
terms of which you'd like to discuss it, or you're defining what we're going to be focusing on. So,
That's a fair point. We're defining the boundaries, if you will,
right.
and I think in future podcasts, gather discussions of this kind, we will in fact address those other issues: the politicization in the workplace, the issues of economic upheaval. We will talk about those separately as well. This one is Toxin 101.
Right.
And what I'd like to talk about is, first of all, when you look at a toxin, you have to remember, I have to remember, that it has four characteristics. It is invisible, it is tasteless, it is odorless, and it's intangible. The outcome of these toxins is is a disaster. It's, and I don't think that's a word to overemphasize or underemphasize. It creates great disruption, great
Mhm.
pain, great. If I was going to use an old word, I would even say the word suffering. I think
Right.
it's a world that creates a lack of collegiality. It gets people at odds with one another for reasons they don't even understand. And the business person listening should also remember one other thing. When those toxins are in place and people feel like they're walking on eggs, that is a recipe for destroying creativity and innovation. And creativity and innovation, they sound like easy words to say, but they're incredibly important today because the world is changing, as we all know. I mean, who knows where AI is going to end us up? But things like that. We're going to have to be more creative. We're going to have to look at our resources, whatever they may be, and reapply them. Well, to do that, to repurpose anything, well, you love repurposing furniture and bits and pieces in the house, do you not?
Mhm.
I think I've got you right on that. Repurposing is a very valuable tool, but it's not going to happen when people feel that they can't express themselves freely.
Right.
So I think we want to understand this very destructive, insidious nature of these toxins. Now I'm going to take you to an interesting place, I think interesting, and that is that in the world of exploration, so if you're exploring for raw materials, if you're looking for oil and gas, or if you're in the coal mine, one of the things you are incredibly aware of is toxic gases.
Mm.
And they need specialized, what's the word, equipment.
Filters.
Exactly. It's a very, very dangerous world, but it needs attention. And I want to make one giant comment, and that is your world of human resources does a spectacular job of looking after a combination of process as well as conflict. That's, you really do hit the trail on that. But where I think we need human resources to be ever vigilant, and the word resource is interesting. We were just talking about the 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 explorer who's looking for resources. Resource is a good word here because within the human resource compact, we need individuals or an individuals who actually have that what I call that detection, who can detect toxins in individuals because
Mm.
people hide it. And if it's hidden and the process can't disclose it because it's hidden, then you need somebody who's got that proverbial sixth sense. And just to give it another little angle, Somerset Maugham, the author, back in the 1900s, came off with this brilliant statement where he said, money is like a sixth sense,
Mm,
without which you cannot make a complete use of the other five.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun. But what I really want to say here is that the ability to detect that toxin is not everybody has it. I don't think I do. I like everybody, and I take everybody in good faith and so on. And that has its strengths, but it also has its weaknesses.
Hmm.
And if I can't detect that toxin, we can all end up in, I can end up in trouble. So I just want to put that as a human resource sort of item on the table. And
Hmm.
by the way, I think I'll remind me and remind everybody, we no longer talk about the human resources, we talk about the human treasury. And
Hmm.
that's a way of identifying the incredible wealth that's available in the capacity of a human being. Now,
Right.
if we've agreed then that there's a toxin loose in the workplace, go back to the this concept of the mining or the exploration idea, because if you know there's a toxin in the air, what is the first thing you do? I mean, if I said to you, my garage is full of carbon monoxide, which can happen, what's the first thing you're going to say? You're going to say, open the doors, open the windows. That's the first
Yes.
thing you're going to do. You're not going to call in the brigade or anything. You're going to say, hey, get those doors open. And that's something we need to do. We need to get the doors open. And the way you get the doors open, it's called ventilating. And ventilating is an interesting word because, are you ready for it? Okay, try and
Ready for it.
smile. What do you think's coming? Could it be Latin? Could it be? Could it be? Could it be?
I'm confident it is.
Yeah, well, you're confidently right. Ventilate has two aspects to it. The vent is easy, that's the wind. So we think in terms of a fresh wind coming in. But when we say ventilate, that's a gentle wind. That's a small wind. That's not a wind of a tornado. That's a very gentle wind. So
Hmm.
when you have a toxic environment, you need to be able to bring in the ventilation, but it needs to be done gently. It needs to be done with grace, possibly with kindness. I mean, it's not a question of coming in with a sledgehammer.
Right.
None of this, interestingly, none of the approach to the toxin really, really comes out with, taking out some kind of, chemical filter and getting rid of it. This is done gently. And the word ventilate is a very good, it's a very appropriate description. A gentle wind blowing in. And the gentle wind, in this case, is bringing in new ideas. There's so often in a business, you have the toxic environment and everybody focuses on the toxin. In fact, if you ventilate the toxin, it will go away. And secondly, if you then bring in new ideas, who knows what treasures you're going to find? Who knows what kind of innovation, new capacities, new product lines, new service quotients you're going to find? It's a very, very valuable tool to bring in new ideas. And of course, what you need then is in a management structure, not only the recognition of the toxin, not only that it has to be dealt with, but to deal with it in this manner of just let's have some new ideas on the table and see what that releases in people. So that's sort of step number one. I suppose a step that we all think about, if you go back to the garage example and you say, well, it's full of carbon monoxide, the first thing you would say is turn the engine off. I mean, the source of the toxin, turn it
Hmm.
off, get rid of it. Well, it's not always that easy, is it?
Correct.
So I mean, I will say, yeah, turn the toxin off, but I think in my inner being, I will also say, not so easy, Charlie.
Yeah. We sometimes or often have to work within limitations or restrictions.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So if we go back to the garage example, the toxin may have the carbon monoxide may have nothing to do with, the car, the lawnmower, whatever's in there. So anyway, bringing in the fresh ideas, number one. Number two is when there's a toxic atmosphere or issue, one of the finest ways to break down all the barriers and all the things that go into life and why you're better than I am, but I'm better than you are, and all that nonsense. One of the finest ways to do it is to break bread. Breaking bread goes back to the most ancient of times. This isn't just a sort of, 2025 recipe. This goes back to literally the most ancient of times. It's a tribal response. The tribe sits down. I'm not talking to have a meal. I'm not talking here, by the way, about a Christmas party or a summer party or something like that. Those are fine, but they don't break down toxins. As a matter
Hmm.
of fact, they might, if anything, intensify them because I think they get pushed down deeper. And then you get this camouflage of we're having a very good time when we're not. So
Right.
the part I'm dealing with here is breaking bread with somebody, that proverbial hamburger or, salad or whatever it is you like, with someone else and a cup of tea and coffee and so on. That breaks down a huge amount of those resistances and those difficulties. But here's a bizarre statistic. I shouldn't say bizarre, a bizarre statistic, and that is that process works 78% of the time. I just find it interesting. In other words, if it was that straightforward, all you do is you get the CEO to go and have, lunch with everybody on the shop floor every day of the week.
Right.
Well, we know it doesn't work all the time.
Right.
Now, the third thing is, and this sounds almost like we've gone into I don't know, a planet of, something that's sort of like, how you like to roll your eyes when I say something outrageous?
I never do that.
Yes, you do. Everybody knows it. Our producer has said. But no, what I want to talk about is this. Put together five or six people that are having this toxic issue, and
Mhm.
whatever it may be. And one of the things that's very valuable is to exercise forgiveness. Now, forgiveness sounds, again, you might think we've gone into some sort of, theocratic domain or something. It's nothing to do with that. It's actually, I think even psychiatrists or therapists would agree with this. It really means let it go.
Mm.
And letting something go, I agree, is not the easiest thing in the world to do. If you have undermined me, gone behind my back, and secured a promotion over me, I can see myself finding it very difficult to forgive you, you generically. But what I think is important is that we exercise the ability to forgive for two reasons. One is when you forgive, you get rid of that carbuncle that's actually in your own being. It's like a growing sort of spider or something horrible inside you. It doesn't help. Even if you're absolutely right and you have been maligned and mistreated and abused, the concept of forgiveness to another human being, letting it go, actually releases you, releases me, the author of the contempt or the vengeance, whatever it is I have for that
Yes,
other
because it's often not sitting on that other individual's
No,
mind. You may think that it is,
no,
but you're
no,
creating that story
no.
yourself.
It's
So, yeah.
absolutely, it's very egocentric.
Hmm.
So get
And
rid
you
of it.
don't have control over that other individual
No,
and what
but
they're
you,
thinking. So
but
it's
you
all
do
you.
over the control. You do
Mhm.
have control of your own forgiveness. And
Correct.
here's something else. This is, if we think of the golden rule of doing unto others and so on, which after all, I think is at the heart of respectonomics. Heart of respectonomics does say that we honor other people's freedom of choice. So in a sense, when somebody has gone and maligned us, that's because they exercised that choice.
Right.
And it sounds absolutely backwards to say we should honor it. But let me put this in reverse. How wonderful it is that people honor my freedom of choice. I've done some fairly messy, screwy things in my life, and where other people have, should we say, let it go, they've forgiven it,
Mm.
given it a pass. So, in
Right.
other words, it's an exercise that in and of itself is helpful, but it's also mutually helpful. It comes back on me. So I think it's not, you don't hear that in the corporate culture, do you? You don't hear
No.
the words of forgiveness. You don't really hear about ventilation, and you don't usually hear about breaking bread. But you put the three together, and we're giving each other, one another, a real opportunity to really to remove the toxin altogether. And when you remove the toxin, to create then that sense of ambience, that sense of symbiosis, the sense where people really can collaborate and enjoy one another's company. So,
I think an important part too, just to add in if I can, when it comes to forgiveness,
mhm,
often it's, I mean, you all know one of my favorite questions is help me understand.
mhm,
So perhaps part of that process of forgiveness, as opposed to just an instant forgiveness, may be the idea of communication and dialogue around, can you help me understand? Because again, what our intentions are may not be how it's received or perceived. And so when there's an understanding between the at least the information or what the intention was behind something or the dialogue or whatever unfolded, that often can help assist. And you may still not agree and you don't have to agree, but it may
mhm.
provide some sense of understanding, at least in order to help put you in a position for that forgiveness.
Bingo. I agree 100%. Yeah. I mean, what you've done there is very, very interesting because you've taken the philosophy of, should we say, massaging the toxin. And
Hmm.
what you've just done is to provide a technical next step skill to
Right.
dealing with it. I think that's very valuable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to sort of almost conclude on two things, though, that I think, well, one thing I want to just point out to us all, and that is the business of gossip.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, I probably can put up my hand and say I'm a good gossip monger. Well, there's no such thing as a good gossip monger. That's a contradiction in terms. A gossip is already a monger, and it's a bad monger. So it's not a very good thing to do. And one of the cardinal rules about gossip is if I want to say something about you or your family or whatever, let me please be sure that whatever I say to you, whatever I say about our producer, whatever I say about our Dignity trustees, whatever I say about any of them is the same thing I would say to you openly to your face.
Hmm.
That has to be the creed. So
Yeah.
if I want to be mean-spirited about somebody, then be mean-spirited, but make absolutely certain that I can authentically go in front of that individual and say, I just said this to Sarah. I want to put it now to you in your face.
So
I
that's
think,
perhaps a note for people to pause and think
yeah,
prior to saying
yeah,
something or engaging in something,
yeah,
would I actually feel comfortable
yeah,
if this was
mm,
in front of that individual for
yeah,
sure?
yeah, yeah.
That's a great
I
approach.
and I think your other word you've just used is pause.
Hmm.
One of the great issues with all of these issues of conflict and so on is that literally not just letting it go, but also taking a step back. It's, I know full well when somebody says what I think is the wrong thing, whatever the intention of that wrong thing may have been, it gets hugely aggravated when I jump on it.
Hmm.
So the idea of putting a pause button in place, I think, is very valuable. So we've got understanding the individual, but also under the heading of pause and also under the heading of there shall be no gossip.
Right.
Now, there are two other things I want to talk about. One is, well, they're both in fact the same. They deal with the breeding ground for toxins. If you go into a place that hasn't been cleaned out very well, you will agree, I will agree, that it's a recipe for toxins to grow. It's why we take these antiseptic, sprays and clean surfaces in our kitchen and so on. We're just trying to keep the thing clean. And when we don't keep it clean, whatever that surface is becomes the breeding ground for toxins and nasty bacteria. I think that's fairly straightforward. And there are two breeding grounds that, in a sense, come together at the moment. One is the issue of fear. A lot of people in the workplace today operate under the heading of fear. A
Hmm.
fear that they're going to lose their job, a fear that if they open their mouths, they're going to be beheaded, a fear that people are going to laugh at them. It's very incumbent on the, let's say, broadly speaking, the leadership, whether it's political, economic, or business or community, it doesn't matter. But if you detect a sense of fear, we owe it at a very human level to dispel that fear. to give people the freedom, the courage, the conviction that they can speak their minds. Because if we don't have that, we will never find the truth.
Right.
So fear is a nasty animal. And the other part of this breeding ground is the differential that has now opened up between what you might call those that have and those that haven't. This gap in earnings, for example, of, CEOs walking away from their jobs with $100 million and this kind of stuff, and yet people in a grocery store who have to go to the food bank. I mean, they are both positions that morally absolutely cannot coexist. So, one of the things that business and government needs to be aware of is this differential. And I'm not going to be a sort of, communist, everybody should be equal. But I will say relationships in the business world need to be based on value. In other words, if you have a worker of any kind, it doesn't matter if it's a CEO or a door polisher, the key is the value that they provide to that organization. And if they're valuable, that's fine. It should be compensated accordingly. If they're not valuable, then we know the rest of the story. But this breeding ground that has come around because of this differential is a responsibility for leadership to deal with. I'm not sure I've got the answer to it. In fact, I don't. But I do know that the main constituents in a business, whether it's a supplier, an employee, a shareholder, who, staff, whoever it might be, every constituent in that business organization needs to wrestle this differential down to the ground. So it becomes all of us need to be involved in that process. Does that resonate?
Mhm.
Good. Okay, lastly, and very lastly, when we've done all the things we have done, so we have done the new ideas, we've had your approach of let me understand you properly, all of these techniques have been done. You and I know that there's going to be an individual where the rubber has not hit the road. We know that. When that occurs, there are two techniques that I think are part of the next step. The first one is to explore one very straightforward question with the individual. Are you happy? Do you know I've never been in 51 years of investment banking? Not once was I ever asked, are you happy?
Mm.
Just asked. And I mean, my answer might have been, do you mean at work? Do you mean at home? Do you mean in the community? It would have been an explorative subject, I agree. But I'd never been actually asked that question, are you happy?
Mm.
Very straightforward. And the last question is when whatever that answer might be from that individual, the next one is, do you fit in? Because I think a lot of people that are dealing with issues where let's say, have this attitude of toxin or whatever, they are also individuals who do not believe they fit in.
Mhm.
And if that is the case, then it's my responsibility either to show them another place where they can fit in or to change the circumstances so that they can fit in. But it's a fair
Or even
question.
fit, is the role a fit? Because we often know it's not necessary. It can be a myriad of things. It could be just personality wise, but it could
Yeah.
be the actual physical job. It's not bringing
Yeah,
them joy,
absolutely.
right? So maybe not so
Yeah.
much fitting in with other people, but
No.
maybe fit to job or fit to role. Is it a good fit for them, right?
That is the
Are they being
question.
set up for success? Is it helping them be successful?
Yeah.
So typically
Yeah.
when we're successful at something, it provides a certain happiness, level of happiness. And when we're not great at something, it can take a toll on
Yeah.
us. So I think
Mm.
fit for role is important for
Yeah.
sure.
And I love those two questions. Are you happy and do you fit? Because they're both exploratory.
Hmm.
You're not nailing it down, as you've just said. The fit question is to do with the physicality of what you're doing, the context
Hmm.
in which you work, and so
Yeah.
on. It's
Because you may
very
fit in with the group, you may fit in from a personality
yeah,
standpoint, but the
yeah,
role may not be a fit, which is
it,
causing some gossip, which is causing some
yeah,
toxins. So,
yeah,
right.
yeah. No, it's a lovely question, and
Mm.
it's not judgmental. It's
Right.
open-ended. It lets the person explore with themselves. I find a lot of these things are what we're enabling people to do, and I really do. My passion for respectonomics is to give people the tools to be able to look at their own value, their own respect, their own dignity. And as they come to grips, we come to grips with those, then we can actually reinforce them, build them up, and be useful to the next door person.
Hmm.
That's a nice feeling.
Very
I
nice.
think it's time. Sarah, thank you. I rest my case.
Thank you, Jeremy.